Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Canada Hoops. It's your boy Matty. Thank you for your continued support. Please continue to download and share us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit us up on Instagram and X.com. We're going to chat the senior men's national team for Canada basketball today. They're about to tip off in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan for the FIBA AmeriCup Qualifiers. A cool roster and group of players that have been put together for Saskatoon. We'll chat some Canadian NBA highlights and storylines. And to join us to do this, our friend Jonathan Chen. So excited, get to reunite and have a good conversation. If you don't know Jonathan and you follow Canada basketball, you got to hit him up, follow him on X.com. He contributes to the Raptors Republic. Jonathan, man, appreciate this. Always good to see you, bro.
Yeah, of course, man. Good to see you. I'm glad to be back. It's been a long layover, I guess, for Canada basketball, but it's good to be back. It's good to be back.
Definitely, man. Well said. And we got, a cool, topic and storyline to get into with the AmeriCup qualifiers really starting, another quad of cool tournaments and important tournaments. We got 2 games this week in Saskatoon. The first game on Thursday night, November 21st against the Dominican Republic, and then the second game on the Sunday against Mexico. Canada basketball put the group of players out there last week that has been invited, and they expected or hope to attend in Saskatoon. We're starting to see trickles of, who's made it to Saskatoon on social media, whether it's from the players themselves or Canada basketball. Pretty cool group. Chen, I think you would agree with that. A lot of us thought it was, a cool mix. Some guys that, haven't played for Canada since the youth level, and some guys that are expected to, be key parts of the winter core and already have. Just give us your thoughts, man. And if you want to kind of break down what you like about this roster and who you think is going to, maybe make an impact.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's exactly right. Like what you said there, Maddie. I think it's an interesting roster, mainly first, like just because, the winter core vets that have been there for the past couple of years and the past couple of cycles, like Phil Scrubb, Tommy Scrubb, Melvin Ejim, Kyle Wilcher, those types of guys, they're not on this list. And I wrote in the piece kind of reacting to the news that I don't think this is like necessarily the end for them being part of the national team at all.
Right.
They are getting like once 2028 rolls around, I think they're going to be in their mid to late 30s. So I think maybe by then, it's kind of inevitable that they will be eventually aged out. But, they're all still having really strong kind of contributing role seasons in Europe. So anyways, that was one of the biggest kind of things that jumped out immediately was just that. Yeah. Like you think about Canada basketball and the winter core, you think about like the Scrub brothers, for example. So that was a big surprise, but yeah, I think Canada basketball is clearly taking and using the AmeriCup again as kind of like a developmental competition, like they did in 2022, where they brought that really young team along with Delano Banton. So yeah, I think they're taking it as an opportunity to try out some of these guys who are 25, 26, born in around 1998. Just kind of integrate them, get more players involved in the program, just to see kind of who maybe sticks longer term. And I think it's a lot of pretty high level talent as well, I would say. You have a lot of kind of G League guys like Nate Darling, who's never been part of the program, who I know a lot of people are really high on, especially with his shooting in the FIBA game. And then you have guys who went to like really high major programs like Marcus Carr, who's kind of involved now for the first time on the national team or the senior men's national team side. So yeah, no, I think it's a pretty solid roster as well, even though there are not quite as much, I guess, like as much continuity as we've come to expect from the winter core. But yeah, overall, I think Canada basketball is kind of picking a direction and they're sticking with it.
Yeah, well said. And I think it's always going to be a point in the program and for players in their career where it's like, okay, we're not going to get the likes of Phil and Tommy and Mel anymore. And some priorities probably have changed, especially for Phil and Tommy. They got young kids and lots of travel, and they were huge pieces, obviously, for the winter core, if you will, to qualify for the World Cup in 23 and into the Olympics. So, it's almost like you tip your hat to those guys. Thank you so much. And now it's let's roll it out for a new wave of guys that can make their mark. And you look at a guy like Trey Bell Haynes, who I think is kind of probably moving into that role as a senior guy now, just having also been a huge part of the last quad and was on the World Cup team. Trey is a guy that I think the program really likes, and he will play for Canada whenever he can. And he's kind of that next wave of, always there. I can always count on kind of guy. And yeah, Nate Darling is exciting, man. Like, I'm glad you brought him up. He was part of that U19 team in 2017 that, won the gold alongside RJ and others. And he's a gunner, and he's trying to do whatever he can to crack an NBA team, and he's stayed with it. And he's an interesting player. I'm excited to see what he does. I think he's um, probably hungry for this and an opportunity to just rep the red and white again. And getting a guy like Cabin Gelly back in, who was pretty close to making the Paris team. Like, there was talks that it was pretty much him or Ken Birch, right? So good to see him in the mix, and the bigs and Thomas Kennedy. And I think the guard play is really solid. And I like Jackson Rowe on this team a lot. I think we've talked about him in the group chat with Witt and others, but he close to making the Warriors this year, and had a really great summer with them. And he loves to play for Canada. I know that's what he's told us on our episode with him. And cool team, man. I think it'd be interesting to see how they use a rotation. And I think the continuity, like, that's the one thing that comes to mind, like you said, is what's this going to look like. Some guys I think are probably pretty familiar with each other, no question. Maybe some newcomers to the senior men's national team, but to kind of tie all that in, we got Nate Mitchell as the head coach and his staff, who have worked together a lot. But I think people were stoked to see Nate named as the head coach. Made a lot of sense. What you're the X's and O's guy, Chen. Like, what do you expect from Nate in terms of what he's going to run, and who you think he might use to implement certain systems and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think the good thing is we have kind of prior history to look at with Nate Mitchell, in the sense where he was the head coach for both Global Jam in 2022 and 2023. And that's technically not the senior team, but you can kind of see, and he's kind of actually familiar with a lot of these players, Marcus Carr, Thomas Kennedy, from that kind of tournament. And also, of course, the 2022 AmeriCup as well. He was the head coach, and he took like a really young team into, I would say, a pretty surprising 4th place finish. And so I think the one thing that kind of jumped out to me is he likes to play some zone defense a lot, especially off of like sideline or like baseline out of bounds plays. He likes to just mix it in. That's definitely something that he was pretty consistent in doing. Offensively, I don't think I have like an exact kind of coherent identity yet for Nate Mitchell's offense, but he ran a lot of really cool stuff, really kind of motion, a lot of kind of very kind of modern NBA offenses. So I think I'm curious to see what that kind of looks like with the senior men's national team. And also, like, he's been a part as like an assistant coach for a lot of the winter core and as well as the summer core. So I'm sure he had some kind of role in Jordy's offense or Nate Bjorgren's offense, which I'm a lot more familiar with, which was like very kind of heavy on the bigs being kind of the playmaking, dribble handoff kind of hubs in the offense. And I think that fits in perfectly with some of the players on the team like Fardaz, Amac, Thomas Kennedy, especially.
Right.
I think they both have a little bit of some like playmaking chops, especially Thomas Kennedy. And I think that's definitely something that Canada can lean on and really kind of drill down in these winter core opportunities, and also bring that to the summer core because of a guy like Kelly Olynyk and his playmaking. So I think that'll be definitely something that I'll be watching out for. Yeah, and I guess the other thing really is going to be just the defense in terms of the perimeter defense. So we know that this past summer we didn't have a real interior presence, a rim protector on defense. I guess Kem Birch was slightly that, but he played well in some of his minutes, especially I think against one of the exhibition games. He was really good and he was really fantastic. But I would say overall it was probably mediocre or below average kind of rim protection. So Jordy's response was really that full court pressure and really extending Canada's defense up to like 94 feet. They would routinely kind of pick up the opposing guard who's bringing the ball up 94 feet with Ludor, Nickeil, Shea, and just hound opposing defense or offensive ball handlers. So I think that'll be something curious to see because, Nate Mitchell, he loves playing zone defense. He loves mixing it in. So I think he's a pretty aggressive defensive play caller. But, I think one of the big focuses, it seems like, for this window is that interior presence. And, having Kabengele, Fardaz, Thomas Kennedy, they're not all rim protectors as well, but I think at this kind of lower level, they're big bodies. So I'm curious if that's going to continue. And if it does, somebody like Aaron Best, who's kind of that pest at the point of attack, that's someone who would perfectly just kind of pick up someone 94 feet. Marcus Carr as well, who really improved as a defender throughout his collegiate career. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things we've seen before. And he's been integral within Canada basketball's kind of offense and defense throughout the years with the senior men's national team. So I'm excited to kind of see how that differs and what his kind of imprint is on the team.
Yeah, I think, a couple things come to mind. Like, I think Phil Chevtovic's going to join us next month on the podcast. And, we were trying to maybe line it up before Saskatoon, but didn't work out. So looking forward to that conversation, just trying to get his point of view. Just, we can look at these games in Saskatoon in particular with him and just see what they tried to do and implement an approach. And I think he's, Nate Mitchell and his staff have a cool roster to tinker with. I think this is a cool group that can probably do some things they want to do that they have in mind as a coaching staff. So I think really good size, like you mentioned, given that it's a winter core moment window. And yeah, it'll be interesting at the perimeter. Like Aaron Best can be that guy. He can get into people. And then offensively, he's a gunner on the wing too. So cool group. I think I'm looking forward to just seeing what the senior men's national team rolls out. I know Rowan Baird was doing some interviews. Just hey, we're ready to move on. Maybe put the summer behind us and looking forward to a new cycle and just having new players come in and buy in to the program, which is always cool. And I think I don't know about you, but you can answer this. But I think the player I'm most interested to see is probably Nate Darling. Just I know he's kind of I don't want to say underdog, but just kind of a guy that people have always rooted for and hope he gets a chance and an opportunity. So it's cool to see him back with the senior men's national team. And I think the other guy that I think is going to be impactful and is a must, like for them to have success, is Kabengele as well, because he's he's had a good start overseas, and I think his time with the senior men's national team in the summer was obviously very good for him. I don't know, was there a guy you like that you're really keen to see with this group this week?
Yeah, I think for me it's Cavangeli as well, Miandu Cavangeli. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so I think I've wrote a couple pieces now about kind of European Canadian pros over the last 2 years. And last year was kind of his first rookie year in Europe, and he also started out really strong with I think a team in Athens, um, and then he got like the mid-season call up to Venice, and this year, like you mentioned, like he's just starting the year like absolutely on fire, rebounding
yeah,
the hell out of the ball on both ends. Um, yeah, and like he's kind of like, I mean, I know we saw it a little bit this summer, but he's kind of like the interior presence that Canada basketball has been missing on the senior men's national team for quite a long time. Like he's 6'8" or six, or I think 6'9". So he might not be the biggest center, but he is so physical. His
yeah,
screens, boxing out, kind of fighting for position. Like he's always looking for someone to like hit or get a body on. And just his like kind of his work rate, because I've never seen a big run the floor as hard as he does. Um, there's some crazy clips from last year that I kind of compiled together where he's just running like a madman, whether it's coming back on defense or like early offense and kind of running the lanes. Um, so yeah, I think he's like over last year. I think it's pretty clear that he's a EuroLeague level talent, and
right.
as we both know, EuroLeague players aren't usually available for the winter core due to ongoing disputes between FIBA and the EuroLeague, but
Yeah,
um, getting a player of his caliber available for the winter core, and getting him involved in the national team as early as possible is, a major win, a major plus in my mind. And so, I expect him to be kind of the focal point on offense. He's going to be a role threat. I think that was another thing that was missing this summer was, just having a guy that you could dump the ball off to in a pick and roll, and
yeah,
he would actually have some scoring gravity. That's somebody that Cavangeli is. Um, he's not quite the 3-point shooter that some people projected him to be maybe coming out of college, and he actually has like decreased his like 3-point volume as he's moved over to Europe and kind of refined his game a little bit to be as impactful as possible. But yeah, I think Cavangeli is the big one for me. I'm a big fan. I think I've been very high on him for quite a long time. So that's definitely somebody that I think is definitely high on the list. And then if I had to choose one more person, it'd probably just be Fardaz,
yeah,
Amac, because he's blowing me away right now with his rookie year. So he's 25 already. So a little bit of an older kind of first year pro, but he decided to go straight to Europe, and he's playing really well at the FIBA Europe Cup level. So that's like the fourth best or most prestigious European continental league. But as
right.
a rookie, like he's putting up really huge numbers. He's scoring efficiently, and he's another kind of like skilled big where he can kind of do a little bit of everything right now. He's a little bit more floor bound than Cavangeli, but he can shoot the ball a little. I've seen clips of him passing the ball with some interesting kind of reads in the NCAA, and of course, he rebounds the ball like crazy, and that's important, to close out defensive possessions. So, yeah, I would say I think it's clear that there's an investment in the front court, in the center position, in the interior, and I think Cavangeli is going to be even on the summer core teams. Like Cavangeli is a guy that I think should be on those teams as a backup to Edey, but
Right.
I think that's probably the most interesting thing to me is just the investment in the front court um, coming into this new window.
Yeah, it's nice to see it because and have guys come in that are interested and want to do it. Like that's been a glaring hole for the vast majority of the teams that Canada basketball's rolled out for the senior men's national team. So good to see that. There is some guys out there that they've identified obviously that can contribute. So that's cool to see. And I think we had talked about it. A whole lot of us in the summer, like Calvin Gelly had a shot to make that team. It was really close, and maybe just went with more of a vet and Cam, but super cool to see. And I know like uh, Tyler Ennis looks like he's out for injury with an injury, so he was initially on the list, which is another guy that I was keen to see come back into the mix for the senior men's national team. He's had a long road through injuries, but playing really well, and then just suffered a recent injury. So that was a guy I had my eye on.
Yeah.
Disappointed we don't get to see him, and obviously he needs to heal up, so we wish him the best. But that would have been a cool thing to see for him back with the senior team. Wanted to ask you, Chen, like if we look ahead to the senior men's national team in a couple of summers, and we're talking about maybe the head coach position, and if Jordi Fernandez isn't available at some point, do we think talking about Nate Mitchell and his approach and his tenure now, and he's coaching in China right now. But his time at the program with Canada basketball has been long and committed, and he knows a lot of the players through all levels. Like, do we think Nate would be a guy that the program would take a serious look at to eventually be the head coach, senior men's national team, maybe at a World Cup, maybe at Olympics? Like, we're looking down the future, and we don't know what Jordy's situation will be, but um, do we think Nate has a chance to maybe be that guy for Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the logical move in his own kind of career path, because he
Right.
has been the head coach already of like the AmeriCup, and now he's presumably the head coach of the Winter Core for both the AmeriCup qualifiers, these two windows, probably for the World Cup qualifiers as well.
Right.
And yeah, like you mentioned, I think like he definitely has like really strong relationships with a lot of the players through kind of his player development days. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. Um, yeah, I think I don't know anything about like kind of Jordi Fernandez and his availability, and I don't know if they want to bring in someone like Gordy Herbert because I think he's not with the German national team anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that's kind of or I guess the next logical step is right now being the head coach of the Winter Core. Um, and maybe that means he'll also be the senior men's national team, but I think we'll see kind of with also the performance of the team under his tenure. Because yeah, like I guess one guy that we haven't mentioned a lot is Nate Bjorgren, who took over in 2021 as kind of the Winter Core guy underneath Nick Nurse, and I know his NBA kind of head coaching days weren't that great and didn't go
Yeah.
super well in Indiana, especially with kind of like the player relationship side, uh, apparently. But he did a fantastic job with the senior men's national team. I think I have the stat here, but I think Canada went 9-1 in the 10 games that he was the head coach for with the Winter Core.
Right.
And that was largely the World Cup 2023 qualifiers where Canada went 11-1. So you just take out the two summer games, and then I think that one loss was to Argentina on the road in Argentina. So like it's like they put up a good fight that game, but I think Nate Bjorgren did a fantastic job with the Winter Core, and really establishing continuity. So yeah, I think in the case for Nate Mitchell, probably this is the next step is to be the Winter Core guy, and then maybe this cycle or maybe the next cycle start to be the Summer Core guy. It might be in the cards. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to project anything out there. I'm getting
Right.
ahead of myself. We're just a few months away or removed from the Paris Olympics. But a lot can change. Look how quick they had to pivot from Nick Nurse to Jordy a year ago for the World Cup. So, I just think this is a good moment right now for Nate with the AmeriCup qualifiers and moving forward, and like you said, solidifying himself as the head coach for future winter core qualifiers, and just makes a lot of sense. And I mean, listen, that travel for him to come back from China is
Right.
no joke.
Yeah.
So shout out Nate for that, and hats off, because that's not an easy thing. But I'm sure he said, absolutely, I'm in, no question, right? So, yeah, it's great to be able to see the red and white play again. It's Thursday night. It's the first game against the Dominican. Thanks to Sportsnet, they're going to show it as well, and the game on Sunday. Any concerns about the Dominican in terms of what they pose as a threat, or Mexico? I know Mexico's got is it Kareem Lopez there, the young star,
Yeah.
playing, but
Korea.
yeah, like I'm asking because I really don't know much about their rosters, but I'm just kind of wondering what you think, what we could maybe expect in terms of matchups in both those games.
Yeah, I think Dominican Republic is probably the team to watch out for in this group. And just to explain it for the listeners, so in these AmeriCup qualifiers, each group has 4 teams, and 3 teams are going to go to the AmeriCup.
Right.
And that's not that high of a bar for a team like Canada, especially in the FIBA Americas kind of competitions. But there's like an added complexity here where Nicaragua is the host of the AmeriCup, so they've automatically qualified. So that means out of this, the 3 remaining teams, Canada, Mexico, Dominican Republic, which are the 3 stronger teams in the group, only 2 of them are going to actually qualify for the AmeriCup. So it's like Canada's path to the AmeriCup this summer is a little bit harder than it would be if they were in any other group.
Right.
That being said, I think Canada should still be favored to win both these games and to win the group out. I think right now we're sitting we're 2-0 with a plus 87 point differential, so we really beat down in Nicaragua back in February. So
Right.
we've put ourselves in a good position. And interestingly, actually, Dominican Republic, they actually lost a game to Mexico. So they both split the series back in the February window. So they're both 1-1.
Okay.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah, I think Dominican Republic is probably the stronger team. And yeah, I think Mexico's team, it's a lot of their players, I think, are still kind of holdovers from the 2022 AmeriCup. Like I saw Paul Stoll, who's like their 38-year-old point guard.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember the AmeriCup, he was playing pretty well. Yeah, and they have a couple other guys as well from that AmeriCup team. So I think them and the Dominican Republic, they probably are going to have kind of more of a continuity advantage this time coming into it. But yeah, like I think Canada basketball, this is a talented kind of group, even if some of them are new, and they should be favored. And it's just about kind of taking care of business, because after this window, there's only one more window. So there's 2 more games. And Canada plays both Dominican Republic and Mexico on the road in the next window.
In February, correct?
Sorry?
It'll be in February, correct?
Yeah, February
the next
2025.
one. Yeah.
So, really you get to a point where you're 4-0 here in this window. You take care of business at home, and you're in really, really good position to qualify. And then you don't have to worry about FIBA officiating in Southern America or like in Mexico, which has reared its ugly head, like Connor Morgan's game-winning 3 that was ruled a 2.
Listen,
but
the
yeah,
FIBA
so I think
officiating reared its ugly head at the Paris Olympics too, man. So,
right, right,
right.
yeah, right, yeah. So you just don't want to put yourself into one of those scenarios. So I think Dominican Republic again will be probably the team to watch out for, but can't take anybody lightly here, especially in this window, and take advantage of playing at home.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I know everyone that follows the program and listens to us is locked in and gonna watch these games coming up this week in Saskatoon. Excited to see that. Can we get into some Canadian NBA, Chen? Can we talk some NBA guys?
Of course.
It's been a cool start, man. Like it's been interesting to see how guys have started their seasons. There's obviously great stories with a guy like Zach Edey. Um, Shadeon Sharpe has been on a heater since coming back from injury and played well for Portland. Who's kind of been your favorite guy to lock in on right now, or just the story with it? Like who's been grabbing you with their play and their numbers so far in the NBA this season out of Canada, man?
Yeah. I think probably Edey for
Yeah,
me so far. Um, yeah, I think, shout out to Hair Canada because, he kind of
yeah,
saw it and as always before and ahead of the curve. Um, but yeah, I think I've been pretty high on Edey for his national team kind of career, even back to his like kind of his junior year at Purdue when he first kind of was the player of the year. And I know there was a lot of kind of question marks about can he defend in space, can he play in the NBA, all of those question marks. And even if I also kind of had some of those concerns and share those concerns as well, but I thought in the FIBA game, like there's just no way that Canada can let him not play, if that makes sense. So I
right.
thought that, even if he didn't actually make it to the NBA and he was playing over in Europe, he was going to be on the summer core or the winter core. He would be playing both for me, like kind of like in Kabengele's shoes right now. Like I think he
Yeah,
he just fit a need. His offensive rebounding, ridiculous, and like his
yeah,
interior kind of gravity as a scorer. Like again, talking about interior threats and interior pop, like that's just something Canada hasn't had in a while. And yeah, and I think when we go back to the 2023 World Cup, I thought he would get a lot more run than he actually ended up getting.
yeah,
I think if you take out like the game against Lebanon in the group stages, like he really didn't factor in as much, except for I think a lot of people remember it that are like a -10 stretch against the U.S. in the second
yeah,
quarter. Um, which, by the way, I actually didn't think it was that bad because I think that year or that summer I did a thread on Twitter where like I went back and watched every single possession of that like 2-minute stretch where Canada blew a 10-point lead or whatever it was, and like I think a lot of like the pick and rolls weren't necessarily his fault, and like I thought there was a lot of places that he could improve at. Like he was in the right spot, but maybe he was in at the wrong angle, or he was a little too um, aggressive, getting too close, making too much contact, things like that. Um, so yeah, anyways, fast forward to now, I think he's obviously trimmed down the
yeah,
weight, and he looks a lot better moving, especially backpedaling, which has always been kind of a struggle for him, especially when he's playing in drop. He's always been kind of when it comes to kind of like that backwards momentum, it's always been hard for him.
yeah,
But yeah, like some of these clips that I've seen throughout the season where he's like flipping his hips and he's blocking LeBron's alley oop to um, Anthony Davis and drop. Um, yeah, I think it's just moments like that where it's like he's not only just surviving on the NBA court as a rookie, like he's actually playing well at times. So that's been like I think a really intriguing and kind of really good sign for the national team that he's able to play at a level like the NBA, because that's what was one of the bigger concerns. And yeah, obviously, I think the 3-point shooting has been fun to watch and
yeah,
develop. They're all like absolutely wide open, like nobody's around him, and he's jacking up these threes. But he's always been a good free throw shooter. He's had a nice touch, especially on kind of push shots and floaters. So, that was something that, scouts like to see use as like shooting priors for like 3-point shooting. So it's been cool to kind of see that come to fruition a little bit in flashes and at lower volume. Um, so yeah, I think Zach Edey would probably be the biggest or the person that I've been watching the most this year. But if I had to go with like someone who's gone under the radar a little bit, it would be Keyshawn George, another
yeah,
rookie.
yeah,
I think speaking of like kind of archetypes that Canada basketball is missing, I think this last team in Paris, we didn't really have a big wing or like a big, tall shooting wing. And that's why I've always been really high on Andrew Wiggins' fit with the team. It's kind of, it's just kind of a big wing. And Keyshawn George, he's not the same as Wiggins in terms of maybe as like the in-air vertical threat. But I think I've been watching a little bit of Keyshawn George, talking to some people. And, some of them are really high on him. And, obviously he's shooting a lot of 3-pointers and he's attempting a lot. The volume is there. The efficiency isn't quite there yet, but, I thought somebody, or I've been tracking like Caleb Houston as a tall shooter who can kind of shoot over, kind of contests. But I think somebody like Keyshawn George at least has kind of piqued my interest, and might even overtake Houston for this Olympic cycle or the next one. But yeah, I think those two would be the really interesting ones for me so far this year.
Yeah, I think because of the passion for Canada basketball in the program and recognizing like what Edey is ideally what we need and potentially could solve a lot of problems. Like to see him have this great start and have success where he's impacting games, he's fitting right in, like he's not out of place. His fitness is much better, like you mentioned. Like I just don't see, when the doubters talked about, being too slow and heavy, he fixed that, right? And it's just not there, and he's winning matchups. He's winning matchups on both ends of the floor, and if you followed this kid throughout his career when he started coming on the scene, it's like he has just improved and gotten better every year, and this is no different. And it doesn't really matter what the level is, that he's just attacked it. And I know he probably looks at it like there's doubters everywhere. I'm going to prove them wrong. And I think another thing that is underrated for Zach is he's developed a really good basketball IQ, I think, in a short amount of time. Like I think when I watch him play and he's moving and he's making reads and especially like I would say defensively, like he's seeing and he's getting it. And I just think that's an underrated thing that's not you know showing enough love for Zach, is that I think his IQ is really good in a short amount of time. And um, yeah, listen, the threes that he's banging is really cool. Um, there's if you don't follow Edey Muse on X, it's a great account. I mean, they love Edey so much. But yeah, it's like awesome for Zach, man. And then it just bodes well for the future because for Canada basketball, it is because they brought him in already at times with the program. And I think when you watch him now, just a few short months removed from the Paris Olympics, it's like, man, what if? What if he had been there to make a few plays, impact some games, and just a great storyline for the Canada basketball side in the NBA. And I'm glad you mentioned Keyshawn because I think a guy that um, I'm really excited to watch. He's just taken off is Shadeon Sharpe, and Shadeon was that kind of big guard, big wing too. That when I see him, what he's doing right now at Portland after coming back from an injury is like, man, that was an element that was missing in Paris, no question. And like, listen, we know these guys are key pieces, and they're gonna probably be on the team in 2028. I can't see them not being. I mean, it's gonna be a crazy camp where guys are fighting for spots in less than 4 years' time. But Shaden's having a monster start to the year after coming back from injury and help Portland get some big wins. Him and Delano Banton, to be honest with you. And really cool storylines. I think. I don't know about you. Uh, I think probably Nickeil is probably like my favorite Canadian in the NBA. Um, I like him as a person, and I like his game and just what he's doing for Minnesota. He's been in other interviews where he's talked about, um, he wanted to be more impactful this year for the Wolves, and didn't think he did enough last year. And I think he was disappointed with the summer in Paris for himself and the team, obviously. But he's in a great spot in Minnesota, plays a great role for them. He leads the Wolves in net rating. He's counted on both ends of the floor, and he'll play like clutch minutes, shooting really well, really efficient with it. So loving what Nickeil's been off to this year, and it's just really cool because you can't help but think like what potential rosters would look like, or roles these guys would play down the line for the senior men's national team. So I think when we had struggles this summer in Paris with a Jamal Murray injury, now it's like, man, imagine if Shadeon had been there, or even a Benedict Mathurin, who's having nice minutes, really good minutes, and a start for the Pacers as well. Yeah, just cool. Like it's exciting, man. I think it's just so cool to be able to like lock in on games every night in the league and see these guys and just be like, okay, like this is why I want to watch this game, because I want to see how Zach plays, or how Shaden's playing, or Nickeil, or even Trey Lyles has been playing really well for the Kings right now with some of their injuries and playing good minutes. So I know everyone's kind of got their favorite guy in the league, and obviously SGA's doing SGA things. He's chasing an MVP this year. He's just been absolutely relentless with his production and his numbers. Him and as of a couple days ago, him and Dylan Brooks lead the NBA in plus minus this season. 1 and 2, Shea and Dylan, just shows you how much they're on the floor in big situations and production, right? So really cool. I rambled on, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add on, guys, that you think as well there, Chen.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, the Shadeon Sharpe, the back-to-back 30 games. So I think, disclaimer, I haven't watched the second 30-plus point game yet.
Right.
But I watched the first one, or at least I rewatched like a replay of the first one with just kind of Sharpe's moments. Yeah, no, and like honestly, like I was watching it and I was like, I came away, I was like, how did he get to 30? Because it just felt everything wasn't kind of in the flow of the offense. He had a couple really nice takes against Rudy Gobert towards the end of that game, which was interesting because the game right before, he kind of struggled going up against Rudy Gobert in the paint against the Timberwolves. So it was interesting to kind of see that growth in just one game. But yeah, no, I think it's, as we're outside of Canada basketball, and Canada basketball has their own evaluators when it comes to kind of on the court play and kind of player development. But I think it's always a good sign when Canada basketball especially invites a guy who's much younger than whatever the age group usually is to the training camp, which is, and obviously the senior men's national team, there is no kind of like age limit, but like, Shadeon Sharpe and Leonard Miller were both guys that were invited to camp. They participated in camp, even though they weren't going to be actually on the roster or in contention to make it to the roster. And I think that's like clearly something that is a sign, at least, that they're going to be involved in this next cycle, because, if we go back to something like Kabengele as well, everybody in Canada basketball involved with the national team was kind of preaching continuity for this 2024 Olympic cycle. And then all of a sudden they invite Kabengele, who's never played on the national team, never been invited to the senior men's team, to the training camp for the biggest tournament that Canada basketball has been involved with on the men's side for 24 years.
Yeah.
And, that, I think that was something that I was like, like, it's like that Brian Windhorst moment, like, what are they up to? But yeah, I mean, I think clearly that was kind of like a token of kind of goodwill from Canada basketball side to get you involved, give you an opportunity. And maybe it came with an understanding that Kabengele was going to be in the winter core. So, I think the fact that Sharpe and Leonard Miller, and then Edey the year before when he was in college, and even Ben Mathurin when he was in college in I think it was the 2019 World Cup, he got invited to training camp. I think these guys, just kind of keeping them in the program, getting them involved, I think really pays dividends for when they enter their primes and they're ready to kind of really contribute to the team in high leverage situations. I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And yeah, I think like with all of this like young talent and also like kind of veteran talent and more established talent now in the NBA, I think it's like maybe it's time for that Canada basketball to go with that USA basketball, like the USA select team, to kind of train with the training camp as well, or train with the real team in training camp. Everybody's talking about like that Cooper Flag game, scrimmages against like Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday and Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something. So I don't know if that's something that Canada basketball has ever considered, or if there's like too much of a cost there for the federation. But I think that's definitely something that I would hope kind of gets instilled soon, especially with kind of the explosion of now that we have that kind of like divide now where it's like, yes, we have a bunch of young players coming in every year who aren't as established in the NBA, even overseas. And then we have those guys who have, established themselves as legitimate NBA guys. They play big minutes for their various teams. And then just having an opportunity for, both sides to kind of compete against each other, develop. I think that's definitely something that I hope gets kind of implemented in the near future, but I don't know how realistic that is.
Well, I thought like that was sort of a premise that they were trying to look at, I think, leading into the last summer with camp.
Okay.
But what held it back was like, because they were talking about, and if I remember the conversation with Mike Bartlett a little bit, was just that they were looking almost like, so you have like a red and white and kind of scrimmage. But, there was injuries out there. It just didn't happen, that it cut the numbers down. So I think the idea like that you're talking about is bang on. And I think that's something they definitely want to do, because if you go another 4 years, if they get ready, say for Los Angeles, then your pool is going to be much deeper as well of players that, there's probably a locked in, let's just say 10 at that point with certain players, but then it's a couple guys compete for a spot, and then everyone else is there just being a part of the program and helping the team prepare. But yeah, injuries were an issue this last summer. Some of the guys were there but not available. So I think that was the idea they wanted to do. And if we look at next summer, the AmeriCup 2025, do you think it's possible we get that Canada basketball brings in and has a guy commit like a high level just to have a summer run, represent the program? But do you think we could see a guy like a young guy like a Shadeon Sharpe say, yeah, I'm in, I want to play? Now I don't know what Shaden's contract situation is and what all that looks like, but do you think they did it with Delano where he wasn't as marquee as a name as way maybe Sharpe is now, but it helped Delano's game a lot? Do you think that's something that they're shooting for? Maybe they've talked to some guys about it already. Do you think we could have a couple younger NBA guys, solidified NBA guys, represent Canada and play in this tournament next summer?
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. I think the fact that like exactly like you mentioned, like Delano, I think was a huge surprise, because usually, at least the way the AmeriCup was going, like they weren't even taking like the good or the very established European pros in 2022. They were taking a lot of young guys who had barely even started their Europe careers, or like at all had started them. So like Delano Banton was a huge surprise, and he was honestly the centerpiece of the team. And it was pretty encouraging, because I think that was right after his rookie year, and there was a lot of kind of growth with his shot form and his mechanics to watch. So yeah, I'm not aware of like how that came to be, whether that was like the Raptors basically saying we're going to loan him out to develop him, basically, because I know he had kind of started the year playing some minutes, and then he went to the 905 for a lot of minutes. But yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting idea to have Shadeon Sharpe. I think it might be a little difficult just because given the precedence of like Shadeon Sharpe, and like usually NBA players of his caliber don't really show up for the AmeriCup, at least for Canada basketball. So yeah, I don't know how likely that is, but I think it's an interesting kind of thought experiment to go through, because I could definitely see Canada basketball potentially doing that, maybe with someone like Leonard Miller, who hasn't been as established and has been in the G League with the Minnesota Timberwolves G League affiliate in Iowa, I think,
Yes.
the last 2 years. Maybe that's an opportunity, because I think also, I think like it definitely has to be a young guy, because I think it'll be interesting to kind of throw them in as kind of more of like a primary option and see how they kind of respond to that. Someone like Shadeon Sharpe might already be a little more used to that at the NBA level. If he's not like the primary option, he's definitely on the scouting report, especially on offense, given
Yeah.
his skill set. So yeah, so I don't know how likely Sharpe is, but I think it'd be really interesting if someone like Leonard Miller is there, and just kind of see how he fares as this kind of like slashing 4/3. Yeah, because I think a lot of people are very high on Leonard Miller as well. Clearly, Canada basketball is, because they keep inviting him to the national team, the senior team. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think
I
the
think
Wolves are too. They just don't have a spot for him. Like the Wolves have some depth,
yeah,
and they have a
yeah,
different look this year with the trade. But yeah, you almost kind of wish Leonard was with a different organization where maybe he would have a better opportunity if the team wasn't as deep. But don't, like I didn't mention Leonard. I'm glad you did. He came to mind because he's somewhat established. He's in the G, but the Wolves do like him, and he
yeah,
was with the
exactly.
program this summer, and he has global jam ties to Nate as well, to Nate Mitchell. So it'd be interesting, right? I think it's a conversation piece. Shaden might be a reach, like on my
Yeah,
part for sure. He's young enough, I guess, but he is definitely established and wouldn't need to go. It would just be more if he wanted to play for the program,
yeah.
right?
And I think it's like we have there, since there's only been like one AmeriCup since Rowan Barrett, or maybe two since Rowan Barrett took over as a general manager, but we don't really kind of know exactly. Like I think we have like an idea that they probably treat this as more of a developmental competition based
Right.
on 2022. But yeah, if this was kind of maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 years down the line, and they do this periodically where they bring this one young NBA player each time as the focal point, I think that would be definitely something to expect. But yeah, I think at this point it's kind of hard to tell. But I think it's a really good idea, though, to try out, and also kind of show these younger NBA guys that's like there's an opportunity to play with a national team, even if they're not fully developed yet and ready to be kind of full-time members on at the really big tournaments, which I think is always the big struggle with especially really young NBA players.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a great idea, though. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, we'll get an idea about, you know, player positions and kind of spots on this team, probably into next summer, just seeing what we see with the games here this week in Saskatoon and what Nate and his staff want to run, and make sure everyone supports the program and tunes into the games. Jonathan, if nobody's familiar with you or listened to you before, where can everybody find you there on X, and then also with the Raptors Republic? Just let everybody know where to get your stuff, man.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I write for Raptors Republic, um, which if you've heard of it, you probably heard of guys like Samson Folk and S. Barahini, who cover the
Yeah,
Raptors more, as well as, there's a lot of great 905 coverage, but I exclusively kind of cover Canada basketball, talking about basically all the levels, all the way down to high school, or like the junior teams. Yeah, and then if I'm not writing an article in Raptors Republic, I'm probably tweeting something about some player or some offensive scheme that they've decided to run.
definitely.
So yeah, you can find me. It's like Jonathan C. Chen and an extra N on Twitter or X.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I think if you're really into Canada basketball and kind of X's and O's, and also kind of like full year-round coverage of Canada basketball, I think following me as well as Maddie and the Canada Hoops podcast, Witter, true north. Everybody that in this community that we've kind of cultivated, they're great follows. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time, I think, for Canada basketball. I know, the AmeriCup doesn't quite have the luster and the prestige of the Olympics, but these are, I think, the one message I would give to listeners who are not as familiar with Canada basketball is these tournaments matter. They're important for qualification to the World Cup and eventually to the Olympics. They're important for FIBA rankings, which is important for the pots and the draws. Because Canada, because we had so little success in the last couple cycles, we were very underranked, which put us in a couple more difficult pools, let's just say.
Yeah.
And I think the Paris Olympics, I personally thought it was kind of like a failure, just like losing that early. But I think the work that they did those 3 years since 2021 really, there's a lot of momentum behind the program, and we're starting this new cycle at a better place than we have in a long time, with the health of the player pool, the continuity on the team, the coaching staff, the front office. So yeah, I think I would say to any basketball fan, tune in, pay attention the next couple of years before the big tournaments roll around, because these are the ground. This is the groundwork for that. This is the foundation for that, for future success.
Yeah, well said. And I'll just echo it in terms of, they did a great job qualifying for the World Cup, and the World Cup was vital for qualification for the Paris Olympics. They didn't have to worry about a last-second tournament. They could prepare and plan. So, yeah, the AmeriCup is key. It's another opportunity to build depth in the program, have more people play for the program and buy in. Opportunity to see some players that you don't get to see that much that we all follow, but and the program is really going in a great direction, and there's a lot of support for it. So make sure to check out these games on Thursday and Sunday in Saskatoon, and cheer on the red and white. I want to thank Jonathan Chen, our good friend, for pulling up. Thank you for listening. Rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to keep supporting Canada basketball and our Canadian Hoopers, and we will see you on the next episode.